Our big topic of the week is our PodPals Doom 3 playthrough. We've been playing through this with the community. Jonas shed his light on the game when he played about 10 years ago, apparently. So what is Doom 3? First of all, let's go through some of the history very quickly. I always thought it was a 2005 game because that's when it was ported, apparently, by Vicarious Visions to the Xbox. It is actually a 2004, and they don't classify it as a first-person shooter. They classify it as a survival horror first-person shooter video game. That is quite telling. You agree with that statement, boys? Yeah, survival horror.
Yeah, completely.
That's it. It's certainly in that ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll drop a quick quote from my wife here while I was playing it, because she always drops in and sees what I'm playing. And I explained that, you know, she saw me play through Doom 2016. I saw how visceral and kinetic it was. And then playing this, she went, "This isn't Doom. This is Resident Evil." And that is quite telling as well. So Doom 3, as usual, is set on Mars in 2045, where a military industry conglomerate has set up a scientific research facility and biological weapons and all that, and things go down the drain very quickly when one of the leading directors, you see him at Burger or whatever it is, I've forgotten his name, sounds like a burger, he causes trouble. You can tell from the beginning, he's going to be the tricky one. Just like Olivia Pierce from Doom 2016. He does very, very similar things, like opening a gateway to hell. The fool. Things develop quite fast, and apparently then there was a commercial success. And I can imagine back in the day, yes, we've got the high textured versions of it and all that. This is the up-res version. I can imagine back in the day in 2004, this was a stunning looking game. Running on a PC. 3.5 million copies of the game sold, and it was very successful for developer id Software. Critics praised the game's graphics and presentation, although some were skeptical and said it doesn't stick to the Doom mechanics of that, like I said, that visceral first-person run and gun. Then they released Resurrection of Evil and Expansion Pass, and what we've been playing, at least me and Greg, Nick can fill us in on what you've been playing now, we've been playing basically the BFG edition, which was the 2012 remaster, which came out on Switch in 2019. Nick, what version were you playing?
I've actually been playing the original version. And the reason for that was because after reading the reviews on Steam, there was a difference in price. Like the one I got was about half the price of the BFG version, and apparently the difficulty was made much easier in the BFG edition, and the lighting was changed completely. So apparently the version I'm playing, the original, is extremely dark, and the lighting is sort of, as far as I understand, according to the reviews, the lighting is much more, is used much more in the gameplay. But I can't comment because I haven't played the BFG edition. I will say that the lighting in the version I played was very reminiscent of Perfect Dark, in the way that that there are like lights and dark sections, and as you know, it's very, very dark in the dark sections basically, and the flashlight.
BFG as well, but yeah, the flashlight is something we'll be talking about later.
Before the flashlight, could you have the flashlight always open in the BFG one?
Yes, that's a.
It's got a battery.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a difference that I did read up on after I'd beat the game, or because I wanted to kind of see what the differences were. And yeah, you could. I noticed like in the original version, you could only have the flashlight up when you didn't have a gun up as well. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Which would make it way more difficult.
Yep.
Yeah, putting your flashlight away before shooting. Unbelievable. Okay. That would make it a lot more difficult. Yes, no, we get the flashlight all the time, so you can be holding a BFG and stick the flashlight on. But it does have this battery which runs down, but it recharges quite quick. Once you turn the flashlight back off, it's like 2 seconds and it's fully recharged again. But it's got a tendency to run out at the worst times. Mm-hmm. So before we start delving deep into it, the Doom franchise and Doom 3, what did you know about it beforehand? And I'll say what Jonas says. Jonas says, I hadn't played Doom 3 in about a decade. This is what he's saying now. This is all from memory. So Doom 3, I first heard of it in 2002 in a magazine. Looked gorgeous. Couldn't believe the lighting. As we said, the lighting is one of the selling points for the game. I would eventually play it on PC in 2010, maybe 2011. It's been a while. And a cousin recommended him, so he tried it out. Is this the first time you played it, boys?
Doom 3 or Doom in general?
Yes, Doom 3.
Yeah,
Doom 3.
the very first time I've played it.
Very first time. Myself as well. And Greg is
too,
shaking his head. Yes. Okay, so on to the intro. What did you think of the intro? Did it draw you in? Was the story immersive from the get-go? Greg?
I will be entirely honest, I did not give one single stuff about the story. I didn't follow it at all the whole way through. Yeah, not a clue. Don't care.
It wasn't the regular kind of, you know, that setting of the Doom Slayer and this fate and everything. And there's nothing of this. You're just a normal Marine who just happens to have a bad day by the looks of it, Nick.
To be honest, I didn't finish the game, as you probably already guessed. I put about 2 or 3 hours into it, and I did most of the intro. I don't know how far I got. You guys will have to tell me later. But it really reminded me of Halo, like the opening section. You know, when you're walking around in the base and you're like the guys are getting you to put on your equipment and test things and make sure everything's working, and then everything kicks off. And the first Doom game I ever played was Doom 2016 on the Switch. So I've played like Unreal Tournament, and I've played Quake on the Dreamcast and on the PS2, but I never actually played any of the original Doom or Wolfenstein games on the PC. And then obviously after I played Doom, 2016, I've bought Doom 1 and 2 and Doom 64, which is actually probably one of my favorites of those early games. So the thing for me was, the first thing that I thought was, this is not Doom. Like, that was my first impression. This is not Doom at all.
I think that hit us all quite hard.
And going back to the time, 2004, 2005, where the industry was going, you know, Halo was already out. Things like Rainbow Six were becoming popular. I can kind of see why they went in this direction, and they tried to sort of make Doom modern, let's say. But as we'll get onto later, I think they failed spectacularly in that regard.
Did you find the intro a little bit too long, a little bit too cumbersome? I personally, myself, I did.
It was interesting, and I was a little bit invested in the story. And, you know, we're getting those sort of PDA files. It's kind of similar to the audio files in BioShock. So, again, mid-2000s, you can see the influence of the games that are coming out. But it was a little bit too long. And I think it took like 30, 40 minutes before any action actually started. Which, you know, that's... Because
you have to go and find a scientist before anything happens, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can't even remember the intro, which is really weird. It's like the game felt, for some reason, that it took so long or something, that the intro feels so far away in my head. I can't remember.
There's a question before we delve deep into the other sections I got here. Is how long did it take you to finish it fully, Greg?
I think I came in just around the 10-hour mark, maybe just slightly below, but it felt an awful lot longer than 10 hours.
There's an in-game counter showing you how long you've... So every time you save, and you can save... One of the good things about it is you can save at any point, and regardless of how many enemies are on screen or whatever, it saves at that particular point. So the save system is good as long as you're on top of it, so you don't have to repeat too many bits, long sections, which you learn very early. Oh, I've died. You got to go back maybe an hour, you know. There could be a long section. But as long as you're saving and on top of it, you don't have far to go back. So this in-game counter, at the end of the game, I was about... I've forgotten now. I did write down. About 12 hours, say, right? So 12 hours. But in reality, my Switch is saying 15 or more hours, and I'm pushing 20.
Okay.
I know it's up there, 18, 19 hours.
Yeah, my Switch is saying exactly the same thing. Yeah, there's a lot of repeated sections. And, to be honest, I've never seen an in-game clock for any game go as slow as it did in Doom 3.
I think I saved too often, which made that clock appear slower than it should have as well. You clear a room, right, save.
Yeah.
So graphically, we talked about the graphics first of all. For 2004, it must have been a stunning game. What I'm interested in what Nick thinks now, because you played the original one, and then what me and Greg after. What do you think graphically of the game?
I played the original, and it doesn't support widescreen, so it can only be played 4:3, and the highest resolution I think is 1200 by 900, so it's basically HD. But I thought for the time, I think this game looks amazing. I think it's stunning, even graphically. There's so much detail in at least in the bit at the beginning what I played through, in the sort of offices and everything, and when you go through and then down into the mines and stuff, like a lot of detail, like good texture work, just lots of little sort of bits and bobs dotted around the level to give it sort of that realistic look. And I think the graphics, especially for the time, were really, really good. Really good.
Yeah, I agree. It's not, they were not too bad. And I'm obviously playing the BFG, which was the 2012 version, so they probably much
touched it up at least.
HD, touched it up. But with the lighting we talked about before as well, and the way the lighting system, it must have been so revolutionary back then. It's unbelievable, because it still does look good.
Yeah.
Yes, some of the faces and all that on some of the characters look a bit wonky, that's to be expected. But the actual architecture of the rooms and everything, and the textures on the walls and the floors, if you go right close to them, yes, you can. It loses its detail, but from just looking at that kind of widescreen screen, it looked quite nice, I thought. Greg?
Yeah, I actually thought it looked pretty good as well. Back at the time when it was originally released on the Xbox, like I remember it kind of being almost like a sort of a showpiece. Like it was one of those games that obviously on the GameCube, you kind of looked across it and thought that looks like very impressive, like the lighting and stuff. And I think it actually holds up pretty well. Obviously, like the character models and stuff, they're definitely showing their age, and it's that sort of character design that I'm not really that keen on. Like, but in terms of like the lighting, and I think there's options in the settings and stuff to set up like the turn on and off like the shadows or something with the flashlight and all. I didn't really muck about with that, so I don't really know what it likes otherwise. But the standard settings, I actually thought it holds up pretty well and doesn't look completely out of place.
I was quite pleasantly surprised as well how smoothly it runs. There was no, even when the action got heated with 4 or 5 enemies on screen, there was no slowdown or anything. It ran pretty well all the way through. Sound design, that's something, because they go in for this more immersive survival horror. Did you like the sound design, Nick?
To be honest, I can't really comment on this that much, because when I was playing through it, the sound was fairly low. I remember the thumping title screen music, and
which seems off place. It's like, yes, this is Doom, da 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 da, and the title screen is that heavy metal soundtrack, and you're thinking, yes, I'm gonna get some Doom now. And when you get in game,
it's not a patch on 2016, is it? Like, it's very. I suppose if you've got headphones or if you've got a good sort of surround sound system, then the way, from the typical survival horror game point of view, then you've got the noises of stuff around you and in different directions. Then I can understand from that point of view why they probably didn't include music, so that you can hear all those things, and it heightens the sense of fear. It
makes the environments, I was just about to say, it makes it scarier,
But nothing particularly special from my point of view. I wasn't playing with headphones, just on the TV, so...
To be honest, it kind of made me think about the Switch Lite. I kind of forgot about how immersive game experiences can be when you're you play it on the TV and you have the volume up and you're really getting into it, because I played a decent amount of this game just in handheld mode, just maybe in the living room while the family's doing stuff, so the sound wasn't really having any sort of impact on me, because I only really could have it on loud enough just that I could hear the enemies coming, but once I put it onto the TV and had the sound up and was playing it with the controller and stuff, it felt much better, and yeah, I actually thought the sound wasn't too bad.
And then just to kind of round up before Jonas kind of talks about all these kind of things in one post. So the story, as it's building the story through, the way they build the story are through PDAs. And it's a very simple story. It's the Doom story, you know. Hell has been opened up. There's demons everywhere. You've got to take them down and shut the hellhole. And there's these PDAs littered everywhere. They're everywhere with, some are sound bites, some are video files where they just recorded audio, and some are like emailed, basically saying, hey, I've got the code for this locker. And there's a hell of a lot of lockers where you need the PDA to read this code, 4-digit code. There's 6-digit codes later on as well, a few of them. To find out the code for this number 312 locker, and then open it, and then you get a bounty of weapons and health, which are very much sought after. Mm-hmm. I hated it. I didn't want to use them. It drew me away from the game. It made the game longer. I'm wondering if when I'm in the kind of, it feels like a pause menu, you know, because you bring your PDA up and it scrolls up to the screen. Then you've got to scroll down to the email, and normally it's the one at the bottom that you want because you're that place in the game. But then, it's not in that email, is it in this email? You spend far too much time looking at this PDA, and in the end you're just like, forget it. Similar problem, Greg?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, end my life. Like, I hate that sort of stuff in games. Like, even like Resident Evil games or whatever, you know, you read like the literature around the place, and like people have their blogs or whatever it is, they write down their research and stuff. Like, I hate reading. I generally just skip all that because I'm not that bored, and it doesn't really add stuff for me, really. And this PDA system, like, I absolutely hated it as well. And like, the amount of crates that I just left unopened because I couldn't be bothered to go in and look for the codes, just like, I probably only opened about 3 in total throughout. I don't know if that made the experience harder for me than it would have normally been.
Probably.
But I would probably have added a good hour or 2 onto the game again, like if I was sitting reading through all them or going into the emails. And even when you have the PDA up, I think the action still takes place even when you have it up. I think, like, if there's enemies, they can still attack. Is that wrong?
I'm not too sure. Maybe, but I always pulled it up after clearing a room. You know, I never.
Yeah. See, I generally did, but I think there was one time where I brought it up, and then there was like a wee sneaky enemy that was just came up. So I think everything's still happening while you have it open.
And it covers the entire screen. It's not as if you can still see, you know, if it was just in front of your face, you could still see the background. No, it covers the entire screen as well. That's making it even harder. Nick, any thoughts on the story, PDAs and all that? Did you use them?
I think what you guys have said is generally what I think as well. I think it's just a product of the era, because, you know, BioShock was doing this as well shortly after Doom 3 came out, where you had the audio files. And if I enjoy the story and I enjoy the game, I think this sort of content is good for those that want it. The problem in Doom 3 is that it's almost mandatory. You have to do this sort of stuff if you want, as you said, if you want to open the lockers and get the equipment and make the game easier, basically. So yeah, because I wasn't immediately invested in the story, and the intro was a little bit long, the thought of trying to go through all the PDAs and all of this when I just wanted to get to the action was not something that I enjoyed, and it was a contributing factor into why I didn't bother going much further. So I think there is a place for this for this style of storytelling, but it definitely needs to be optional.
Something that Jonas has written here made me chuckle, and it is quite right. Do you want to read it, Nick? Because you might not be with us all for longer.
The plot is nothing special because you know exactly what happens. In a way, this dampens the horror vibe because it's not mysterious at all. The audio logs do nothing to improve it because they only come in 2 flavors. I'm scared. What's happening? The code you need is 123, or the guy who runs this place is mighty suspicious. He might be evil. The code you need is 321. Sorry, and it gets repetitive. In System Shock 2, they gave you a feel for what the place was before the disaster, and the lore is intriguing because it's not made clear exactly how things got this bad. Even when you know the main twist in that game, it's still unclear how all this fits together. But in Doom 3, all you get is boring descriptions of grunt work and a bunch of captains stating the obvious, what you already knew from the start. And I will add that BioShock as well is another game. You arrive in the place after the disaster, and the audio logs help you piece together what happened.
Yeah.
And I think, Jonas has hit the nail on the head here. I've never played System Shock 2, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, exactly. They're not really adding anything of value, are they? It's just standard stuff. And I can see from one side that's sort of world building, and they're giving the game of the player the impression of what these people do in this world. But again, it should be optional, not mandatory, and it is really in Doom 3 as far as I can understand.
Because you need those codes.
Yeah.
Those codes.
Yeah, I only use them when I absolutely had to go and get something. I'm actually impressed by how well Jonas is remembering the game, because I don't think I'll remember it this well in 10 years' time.
Thank you, Jonas. So, on to one of my favourite things to talk about Doom 3 is level design. And for me, myself, I can sum up the level design as you come to two doors, one is locked, you navigate the other way, you go around in a circle, you pick up the PDA, which has got an access card or something built in. You kind of loops you back around to where you were initially. Then you unlock that door and you carry on and repeat. It's the level design is very... There's no map for one. This is one of the problems. There's no map. And... there's nothing. but the weird thing is you don't feel lost that often.
Well,
there were times when I did get lost. There were times when I did get lost and I've circled over and gone, I'm not too sure where I'm going. I don't know where I'm going here, because of objectives not being clear what you need to do. It pops. Sometimes these objectives pop up and then they disappear off the screen. And if you haven't read it, you have no idea what you're supposed to be doing.
They're in your PDA.
Are they? No, I couldn't find them.
Yeah, pretty sure they're there.
I couldn't find them.
I think it's maybe the one up. You know the way you said, like, usually the thing you need is at the bottom or whatever. You scroll to whatever. I think the one at the very top. Maybe I remember it wrong, but it shows you the objective again on the screen.
Okay, no, I see. Didn't even know that. But with no map, you kind of get the feel for them. But I found the levels themselves as well very claustrophobic. Everything is neatly put in these little boxes and everything is tightly packed, which I'll elaborate on later. It doesn't give the kind of game they go in for. It doesn't make it any easier or make it feel better. They've gone for enemies in a kind of old school first person shooter Turok style. You see an enemy, you back off, and while shooting, give yourself a bit of space and take down that enemy, because some of them are bullet sponges. It's very difficult to back off when you're in this cramped little space and you're going down these narrow little hallways and the door behind you isn't opening properly. It's really frustrating at times. Really frustrating. And you jump by 3 enemies and you're pinned in a corner. You can't move. And they're whittling your health down. And that's what the kind of enemy design is. The level design and the enemy design, they're there to slowly drag your energy down to 0, one after the other. Anything else on the level design there?
I see
Nick ready to talk.
I'm gonna have to go soon, so I'll make my final comments. But you've hit the nail on the head why I didn't like this game. It is, I said before, my first impression was this game is not Doom. And it's not. And having played Doom 64 and 2016 Doom, and also recently having played Turok 1 and 2, the level design for this type of game is awful. I absolutely hated the fact that I didn't feel that I had the movement that I should have in a Doom game. And that was partly restricted by what I believe are not very good controls. Like, obviously in Doom, especially in 2016, you circle around the enemy and you move backwards, you push forwards at times.
There was always plenty of play
Exactly.
space to get around people.
And in this game, you can't do it, and you're just stood there, while you're reloading, you're taking shotgun bullets to the head. Or I hated the system of changing weapons on PC because I had to do the mouse wheel, and obviously I'm not as adept with the mouse and keyboard as I am with a controller, and it was just a nightmare. Constantly selecting the wrong weapon and just getting killed because everything was
on the Switch. It was mapped to the L and R button,
Yeah.
so you had to manually go through everyone after
Yep.
each other. It was cycle through them.
It's the same here as well, manually, but you just have sort of a little bit less precision if you're not used to it. You can press the numbers on the keyboard to change. And I tried to use a controller, but I couldn't get it to set up properly because obviously with it being such an old game, there's no sort of native support for an Xbox controller. But anyway, this was the thing that broke the straw that broke the camel's back, basically. Like, after everything started kicking off, and I was dealing with 1 or 2 enemies with no problem. But then when you go into really tight spaces with 5 or 6 enemies, I was just like, I can't be bothered with this. Like, I don't feel like I've got the power or the ability to take all of these guys down. And especially with the sort of jump scare enemies that just come out of nowhere and you get killed like while you're turning around to kill them. And it frustrated the hell out of me. And I think my overall thoughts after playing the first 2 or 3 hours are that this is not a Doom game, but that this could have been a very good game if it had been built as a survival horror game. I went in expecting something like Doom 64 or like Turok, and it was a sort of it was like a Halo sort of game, but with smaller corridors and with just terrible gunplay compared to Halo. And that's it, basically. Like, I don't have any desire to continue playing this. I don't think it's a very good game, and I think it's a game that was caught in the period it was released, and it sort of struggled to find its identity, and that's for the worse, unfortunately, because I think it does a lot of stuff right, but it's just not a Doom game, and they should have either not called it Doom, basically, and tried to start a new I know they wanted to probably attach the sort of the name and the history to it, but yeah, for me it's not a Doom game, and it was disappointing from that point of view.
I agree with all those. And Nick, you're going to bow out.
I'm
now,
going to
yeah?
bow, but I'll be listening when I edit to see what you two say.
Yeah.
So I'm keen. I'm keen to hear impressions. So yeah, see you next week.
Thanks. Thank you for attending this part of the podcast, and we'll catch up next week.
See you later.
All the best, Nick.
See you later.
So, Greg, carrying on with that, I forgot what we were talking about, level design. What do you make of it?
The lack of map was a big issue for me. Obviously, it's a very linear game, like you say, but there are obviously times when you have to go back to a certain room or whatever. It's like for me anyway, like throughout most of the game, like the environment was pretty much exactly the same, like the whole way through. So everything kind of looked the same. So like no room was so distinct that maybe like, oh, you remember that particular room, so you go back there to go another way. It's like I completely forgot where I was going some of the time. Like even with the objective saying, oh, you need to get back to like the main control room or whatever it would be. Like, and I was sort of thinking, right, where is the main control room? And then you'll maybe go to like the elevator or something, and you'll see like the options for like main control room or whatever, and you go down that way, and you're still sort of hunting around for where it is. It's like I find it very frustrating, and like you say, everything is quite small and like condensed and tight, and that is sort of works against it in the sense of like whenever like enemies are coming at you and you are trying to back off, like you say, like the amount of times I found myself getting caught on a bit of the scenery or something, trying to get away, and it's like, oh, it's so frustrating.
And adding to that frustration were the hidden enemies, which Nick just mentioned. And you don't realise it at first, but Doom used to do this originally anyway. Hidden walls. A wall will pop open at certain parts. So events happen when you pick things up or you walk past a certain point. So it could be there's a health box, an invariable. I mean, so many times it happened that when it didn't happen, you're like, oh, an enemy didn't attack me. You got to pick a health bar up, and you know that's going to trigger a wall opening behind you frequently as well, a wall opening behind you, and you're getting attacked, which adds another bit of element. I don't know if you worked this out, because I certainly didn't. It was very difficult to know where you were being attacked from. If someone was attacking me from behind, I'd be like, where's that coming from? Where's that coming from? I can't visualize there was an on-screen indicator saying this is happening from behind. I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely did happen a few times. Like, you're obviously talking about picking up like the items there, and then like obviously that triggering an event. It pretty much got to the point where like you'd see like a thing of armor there that would add a wee bit onto your thing, and you're sort of thinking, is it really worth it? Because I'm going to lose more health here from the battles. And like I did find myself, there was occasion, obviously, like when you're reloading your save or whatever, there was one time where I did die from just like there was an armor sort of in a. I thought I was like being pretty decent by like actually spotting the armor in this place and like having the skill, or what, not skill, but like the being able to like traverse the environment to get to that particular spot to get it. But as soon as I got it, like everything like went mad, and I'd have had enemies to kill, and like I died. So when I reloaded the save, I thought, well, I'm not going to go for that this time, like, because there was no point. But yeah, like the enemies like popping out of doors and stuff, that definitely caught me a few times. And like certainly for the first section of the game, like you're going through the rooms and you're like clearing it out of enemies, and you think, right, I'm done with this room, you're moving on. But then whenever like you hear the enemies, like that sound, you know, and the enemies are coming
teleporting
in, right?
Yeah.
You think, right, you're ready, but they're teleporting behind you as well, and you don't realize that
in
initially.
a different
so you're
room
firing
behind
away.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're firing forward, trying to kill enemies in front, and then you, like we say, we're trying to back off, hitting the environment and stuff. But then there's another enemy coming behind you that you didn't know was there, and it's just whittling your health down. But once you kind of know that that's happening, the first thing you nearly do is turn around, deal with the enemies behind, and then obviously go for it. But like there'll be some rooms you go into, and there'll be those wee gaps at the bottom of the walls, and as soon as you see those, you're like, right, those big spider type creatures are coming in.
Trites, they're called. Yeah, they're coming out. Yeah. If I go further in here, I'm gonna jump backwards or whatever to get them on one side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, like, even when they're in front of you sometimes, like, and just right in front of your face, trying to pick them off is really difficult. Just when they're right, it's awkward sometimes.
Was it? Why can't I even remember? Was it gyro controls?
There definitely wasn't gyro controls.
No, there wasn't.
Would have helped, because like the aiming was quite fiddly, I found.
Yeah. And I played around with the sensitivity of the aiming as well. And so talking the game is smooth. But there was nothing in the middle which I could quite settle on. It was either slightly good for shooting and just good for moving rather, and bad for shooting, or too slow for moving but much better for precision aiming. And I could never find something in the middle that would suffice for both of them. And one of the problems then, when I ramp it up too far, the sensitivity, is when you have to click on anything, and there's a lot of panels you need to click on, and you're trying to fine tune it so the X turns to an X, so you can actually press it, especially those little number buttons. And then going into the menu to having to change the sensitivity down. Oh, really awkward.
Yeah, the game absolutely had an obsession with those like computer screens. I imagine, like, obviously back at the time when it was released, like there probably weren't that many games where like you could like the graphics were like there was a high enough fidelity that you'd be able to like read properly what was on screens and whatnot. So I think they really went to town in this here, where it's like at every opportunity it's like, oh, here's a computer screen to interact with. Oh, you can read the writing on it and all. This is brilliant. Like, but it just happens so often, and it was extremely fiddly, particularly in one section, which I don't know if we're gonna chat about later. But
we might chat about it now if it's involving a crane game.
It is involving a crane. unreal. Like you tweeted about it actually.
Yeah.
Like just like fiddling around like on this computer screen to like try and move a crane like forward and backwards and like left and right, up and down or whatever. That's awkward enough in itself with like using the right stick to navigate around that screen and do that. It's a really slow process, but like the depth perception of actually seeing it in that the crane's obviously it's moving in a room just in front of you, and you're trying to pick up these like barrels or whatever, and you have to get like the toxic one or whatever it is and go and throw it into like a dumpster or something just to get it out of the way so you can get through that room. Such a fiddly time. Like you must have wasted about 10 minutes there just.
Yeah. And the shadow of the crane wasn't well defined either. It was very difficult to lower it onto the right. But once you work it out, it says, on the screen is a prompt going, yeah, you can use the clamp now. All right, clamp on. And even if it's not clamped on properly, at least the barrel will still stay there. How many barrels did the full 4 before it said, hey, the room is clear? Which was torturous.
It was. I think I just done 2. I'd done 1 barrel because I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing. Actually, I took 1 barrel, and then like I just happened to notice there was one with like I think it was like the stuff like spewing out of it. Yeah. So I sort of realised, oh, that's the one I need to get there. So I think it was just the 2 that I had done. Yeah.
I did times. All 4 of them before I realised. Crane games. So Jonas is going to sum up these graphics and sound and level design. He said, I would soon learn that this Doom wasn't about mowing down hordes of enemies. That comes into it though. This Doom was going for a horror vibe. There's lots of zombies in this, more so than I thought they should be. Taking advantage of the detailed lighting, monsters were well hidden in dark corners and they jumped on you when you got close. Furthermore, there were occasional set pieces meant to unsettle you, as well as audio logs scattered throughout the environment with information about what these corpses were up to their death, along with some important information like codes for doors and safes. And if you've played System Shock 2, you know what I'm on about. What else does he go on to say there, Greg?
That was pretty much the bug of the game. Reach a new area, check the dark corners, waste the strict amount of bullets necessary to kill the enemies, then flip switches, gather key cards, hear audio logs required to advance. It wasn't as repetitive as Halo. I actually tell layouts and environments apart, for example, but it got stretched out way longer than it needed to be.
That's one of the problems of Doom 3. Way too long. Did you feel that the ammo was strictly limited?
No, actually.
No, I didn't have a problem until they sent you to hell and stripped you of everything that you had saved up for.
That's the sort of thing that bugs me in any sort of game that does that, because like I'm the kind of guy that always uses like sort of weak items. Like it kind of like it makes the game more difficult for myself, because you're always saving that like the big guns like the BFG or whatever for whenever it all goes to hell. Like and you've got a big boss and you're trying to take them down quickly. So like I found myself struggling through quite a lot with like the shotgun actually, which to be honest was a wee bit slow, I thought, especially to like reload and stuff. Like it was quite awkward to use, but I'd never really had a problem with bullets, even with like avoiding those crates that you can open up for extra ammunition and stuff. Like I never found myself struggling. I just maybe had to go to like guns that I maybe wasn't as happy using, but I never found myself running out. I never used the pistol once after the like opening section.
The opening section, same yeah. I found myself like using a shotgun until it was low and then changing to the machine gun, use a machine gun till it's low, go back to the shotgun, got more shotgun shells again, go back, and then rotating kind of through 3 or 4 weapons, sometimes using the chain gun, very occasionally using the plasma. Chainsaw was very good on the weak, those sections of zombies, just change to the chainsaw and just plow on ahead. They didn't tend to do much damage to you, but even the chainsaw on the the big spiders, those trites, the chainsaw was very handy on those as well. Not so much on as soon as you got to the first appearance of the Revenants, which are the skeletal warriors with the heat-seeking homing missiles on their shoulders, go around corners like nobody's business, go around corners like Mario. Then you needed something more substantial to take enemies down.
Yeah, those enemies were frustrating because obviously, like, trying to dodge the missiles is hard enough, but when they start like curving towards you, even when you're hiding behind a door, it's like unbelievable. Like, and to be fair, like, I did find myself using the plasma gun quite a lot more towards like the middle and end of the game, because I would often find myself like there'd be these like wee pickups, and I wasn't entirely sure what they were for. You know, you'd have your wee areas where you'd have like, you obviously like your bullets and stuff, and there'd be these sort of like wee blue ones, which I didn't actually realise what they were at the time, but I realising my character's not picking these up, I must be full and whatever they are, and then realised they were for the plasma. So I thought, well, if if I'm full so often, like, I might as well start using them a bit, like, and I did find it quite useful actually.
There was something, I went through what weapons you could get at the end of the game, and there was one weapon I didn't get. It was a super shotgun. I never saw it throughout my entire playthrough.
No, I never saw that one either. No.
Lots of grenades and what else? BFG chainsaw, the plasma gun, chain gun, machine gun. One of the things I did find weird, because the L and R button were mapped to cycling through your weapons, there was no quick and easy access grenade button.
Yep.
You had to cycle to the grenade. Same as your fists. Yep. If you want to do melee, you got to cycle through to it.
I did use my fists through the entire game, apart from one section where you
get the rage.
You have to, the berserk or whatever it is. Yeah. But I never used the grenades. I threw a couple, and like, I found them too awkward to use really, so it wasn't worth it. Like you say, obviously having to cycle to get them, and then even cycling to them is nearly like taking too much time.
They were quite handy for some of the bosses though. You know, the bigger, slower moving bosses, you could just lob 3 grenades down and they'd be walking into them basically. I think that's the only situation I used them in.
Well, at least you got some use out of them.
Yeah, because you could stack up to 50 as well. Jonah says, I don't particularly remember any weapon, but that might have to do with my general disinterest in shooters. What I do remember was my strategy for luring and killing those who slither in the dark also became repetitive. Yes, same here. You're just drawing them out, finding a place where it's slightly safer for you, clearing the guys from behind, like you said, and then clearing the guys in front.
Yep. But then you also have those times where, like, you have those enemies, you know, the ones that are like, they're quite easy to avoid. Like, they'll throw like a fireball at you or whatever, but they can also like dive down and then jump towards you. Like, sometimes they warp around the place. Like, you'll see them.
The slightly smaller ones as well. Yes, yeah.
Yep, I do remember one particular area which I changed my strategy on actually after a few failed attempts, because like my health was quite low when I was going down into a room. And like, there was a few exits out of it, but there was quite a few enemies would come at that time, and anytime like it would sort of like kick off when I was trying to exit through one of the doors or whatever, like the enemy, the wee light thing would appear just at that door, so I was kind of stuck and couldn't go, and then obviously I got trapped going the other way. It's like, yeah, quite frustrating.
Yeah. So difficulty wise, did you find the game difficult? You sound like you've died quite a few times in it.
I did die quite a few times. I would say it's certainly not the hardest game I've ever played. It's more frustrating than anything. Like, you'll sometimes just get into situations where like you'll kind of get stuck, and the enemies will just whittle down your health, and then you have to obviously restart the section again. And that's what eats into the time, like reloading your save. Like, we both pretty much played probably twice as much as the in-game clock says. But I wouldn't say it was that hard. There was a moment, it must have been about 2 or 3 hours in, and you go to like a computer screen, and it gives you an option of like something to do with a bridge, and you can like click one of the options, and it says it's something that gives you like an easier way through, but like. Yeah. Like, I'm not sure. It was 2 different options, and you sort of had to weigh up which one you kind of wanted to do. And
I think the easier one was extend the bridge, I believe. And I clicked on that without even reading it and getting that message up, and just went through.
Yeah. There's some fireworks going off or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Or the
Someone's
gates of hell have opened there. I definitely tried both ones a few times, and like there was one of the times where like the platform kind of just rotated around. You had to jump on the bridge, and for some reason, like I missed it a couple of times, and like it stopped right in front of you, but like I'm not sure what I was doing wrong, but I just somehow missed it a few times, and like I was like, oh, this is annoying. And it was a part of the game where like I wasn't particularly enjoying it that much, and I was like, I might just give it up here, because like I've died a few times at this section. It's really frustrating me now, and I can't be bothered reloading this and sort of anticipating that it's probably going to be like that for the rest of the game. It's going to be like really frustrating, but I stuck with it actually. There were definitely sections where like I died a few times, and you had to sort of like use a bit more strategy and make sure you're using the right weapons and stuff, and to decide which enemies to take out in what order and stuff. But overall, I wouldn't say it was painfully difficult.
No, I agree, but I did find myself clearing a room and then thinking, oh, I just got trapped in the corner, and then running back to one of those wall-mounted health stations, topping up before carrying on. You know, I found myself traversing back and forth, or trying to remember where there was a health pickup I hadn't picked up, and going back to pick that up before continuing on. Yeah, I did that quite a few times, and that would have added a lot more hours into the gameplay as well. Back and forth, picking up health.
Yeah, I did find myself going back a couple of times as well, and like you say, those wee stations where like you can top up your health or whatever. There was some times where I was like, do I deplete this all now just to fill up my health? Then sort of thinking that maybe, like, I'm obviously with no map and stuff and not entirely sure where you're going sometimes, am I actually going to be like coming back through this way again and going to be needing that health for a bit later?
And there are sections when that actually does happen, yes. Yeah.
Although there's probably a few sections as well actually where I found like there was an abundance of the health stations, so I didn't really need all the time.
So Jonah says the funny thing is they finally do something different for the last couple of hours. So we read what Jonah says, and then we'll talk about our more criticisms, I suppose, and oddities of the game. But he says the last couple of hours of the game, because that's when the game suddenly decides to turn into proper Doom. And I didn't quite see it as proper Doom. Yeah, threw more enemies at you, but now you fight hordes of monsters. Now you've got some running and marathon running. Now you got to rip and tear. Okay, you can shoot a lot to your heart's content. There's even a final boss. Yes, there was, accompanied by an army of monsters. First boss in the game too. There were kind of sub-bosses, these kind of spider enemies, which I found easy. I found the end boss easier than the previous sub-bosses that had come before them. It's kind of antithetical to the rest of the game, but the game does properly build up towards this finale. Even in gameplay, the stronger enemies are meant to prepare you for this, so I'll give it that. So Jonas liked the ending of it. How about yourself?
Well, actually, you kind of prepared me for the final boss, because there's a point in the game. Obviously, I hadn't really been following the story, didn't really know what was happening, so didn't really care. And you picked up this item called, I think it was the Soul Cube.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what that was for. It was just in my inventory, and like he was holding it for a while, and then realised there was enemies came up, so like I changed to a gun, and then just completely kind of forgot about it. Didn't ever use it for anything. But you told me that you needed it for the final boss. So if you hadn't told me about that, I would probably have been firing away at that final boss, not knowing why it wasn't dying, or I don't think there's even a health bar or anything. So like I'd probably been firing away at it and wondering why is it taking so long, and probably getting frustrated. It probably tells you in the PDA somewhere, but like we say, I
read it in the PDA, and basically the soul, there's a little, you got to pick it up though, it doesn't come free. There's something about the soul cube and blah blah blah, and basically what it boils down to is that the soul cube is there, you throw it out like a grenade basically, but it homes in on the nearest enemies, cuts them into many, many pieces, and it gives you energy back, so it sucks their soul. And so it is very, very handy in some of the trickier sections. And all you have to do is like a one-use thing, but if you kill 5 enemies after that, the soul cube gets reborn. Mm-hmm. So as you were running around this final boss, you had to throw the soul cube at it, kill 5 enemies by circling away from the final boss, wait until he catches back up and throw the soul cube again. I found the final boss extremely easy.
Yeah, I thought it was once I knew it was doing, and I sort of like knowing how the Soul Cube worked after doing the final boss. I thought, oh, that would really help in some of the other sections of the game, because like it was pretty straightforward to use actually. In fairness, I just didn't really know about it. The bit that did make the final boss a wee bit more annoying for me is something that I'm not sure if we're going to get to later as well. It's the run button.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you spend the whole game, like there's a stamina bar there.
I didn't know about the stamina bar.
Yeah, it's sort of hidden away. You don't really think about it. You just realise your character going a bit
thin little
slower.
orange bar which gets depleted. Yeah.
Yeah. So you click it in, and then like you're running. You don't have to like hold it in or anything. You just run until you click it again to say you're not running anymore. And then all of a sudden, once you reach hell, that bar isn't there anymore, and you click the stick in. You click the stick in once, and your character's not running, but you hold the stick in, and you have to hold the stick in. And like that's one of the like control schemes that I hate in anything. Like I hate holding the stick in to do anything. Like it just doesn't feel comfortable, especially on those Joy-Con. It feels a wee bit creaky or something. But I just forcing you to do that, like in the final boss, you had to do it as well just to run away from that big enemy. Obviously, it's
so
bizarre
weird
design choice.
Yeah, very bizarre. I think it was trying to tell something, like, oh, your stamina's been depleted, you're in hell now, something is dragging your energy away from it, but it didn't work in doing it. Holding that button down all the time. You got 3 Hell Knights coming on. Those are those really big, strong, bald, huge monsters throwing blue fireballs at you. You got 3 of those coming at you, and you've got to hold the button down to run. That is the R stick. You've got to push it in to run. Very, very weird design choice. Very obscure. And once you come back out of hell, the stamina bar comes back, and you can click it again.
Yeah.
It's just for that section. Really weird.
Really strange. Just teaching you the whole game to do it one way, just to throw you under the bus.
Anything else about... Well, I'll tell you what. I'll read Jonas's conclusion, and then we'll have yours. Jonas says, Doom 3 took a different approach to the series. Very different, Jonas. But it is unfortunately bogged down by an excessively long and eventually dull mid-game. It takes inspiration from an excellent game, System Shock 2, but it doesn't quite execute those ideas properly. A shame, because a fusion of genres had potential and could have worked if id Software had worked with folk with more experience in the horror genre. But as it stands, it feels like an underwhelming experience. But at least it's not as bad as Halo 1. Oof. The campaign from that game is utter trash. Fight me. All criticisms about Halo 1 to Jonas, please. So how did you feel Doom 3 stood up?
Well, kind of one of the reasons that I had voted for this PodPals episode was that it was different from the other Dooms. Like I've played through the original Doom, and I've played through Doom 2016. I'm not the biggest fan of Doom or anything, but like I knew Doom 3 was supposed to be a bit of a different experience, and at the time we were sort of like deciding what game to play. Like I was kind of in the mood actually to play a shooter or something in that area, and Doom 3 was the one that I have on my system that I bought cheap when it was on sale for like, I think it was like £1 something like dirt cheap, or maybe it was a couple of £2, but I was just there and thought like I kind of fancy giving this a go just to see what it's like and stuff. And initially, certainly for the first 2 or 3 hours, like I was really frustrated by it, and I didn't like it at all. And like I say, I was pretty much ready to bail on it. I did warm to it a bit actually as I went through and kind of got used to the way it worked, and what all the weapons were like, and figuring out the patterns of the enemies and stuff. Like I didn't hate it in the end. Like I probably did hate it at the start, but I didn't hate it in the end. It's not a brilliant game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not, I wouldn't say it's terrible either. Like I'm kind of glad I saw it through to the end. I wouldn't be clamoring to play it again or anything, but yes, it's just okay. It's sort of like I'd say for a 5-6 out of 10 sort of game. Like,
yeah. And I concur. I mean, everything you've said, everything Jonas says, coupled with the kind of claustrophobic, and like he says, it could have been such a good survival horror game, but they've gone down the route of, yeah, we'll have some survival horror, but we'll keep it as a shooter. It just didn't mesh together well enough for the kind of level design that they built around it. It didn't fit together well enough. But it's not a bad game, no. But it doesn't want me playing through that entire campaign. I started off quite positive. I was like, oh yeah, this is Doom, and all right, I'm going with the lore, even with that long intro. I was going with it. The demons start spawning, brilliant. It is that midsection. The midsection just drags on for far too long as well. To the point that there is DLC in this. We got 2 DLC packs as part of the Switch. There was the Resurrection of Evil. They all come back, and I'm quickly looking up the other pack, which was called Last Mission. I've archived it. You know, I have no will or desire to go through any further. Now I've done the entire game. I have no desire to go into the DLC at all. How about you?
I'm exactly the same. Like, it's one of those games where it's done. Like, you check it off, and it's just you'll probably never go back to it. If you had it physically, I imagine you'd be taking it back to the shop for something else. Now you're completely tapped out of it. It was okay. Like, it has its positives, you know. Like, the atmosphere is decent at times, and that's maybe about it. It's not a bad game. Like, the guns, I never felt like any of the guns felt like amazingly powerful or anything. Like, even the shotgun kind of felt a wee bit disappointing, I thought. And then it has its moments where it's like, it almost throws you. We obviously mentioned going into like pick up armor and stuff, like, and that kind of kicks everything off. But there's a couple of moments towards the end where like you come across a thing and you'll see like a wee screen that you can press to like turn lights on or something, and it's like as soon as you hit that, bang, everything goes mad. And like there was no advantage to turning the lights on. Like nothing really like happened from it other than it was just trolling you, really. Just to bring on, and like I definitely died there once from doing that, so I was like, right, I'm not going to do that again. But it's just, it felt a wee bit unnecessary, kind of.
And I felt as if, not forced, of course not forced, but I felt like I had to go and turn all these things on. I had to go and collect all those things. But yeah, you have to learn very quickly to, my health is okay. I'm at 89 health. I don't need that extra 10, which is sitting in the corner. Because, like you say, I might be attacked by 3 imps and lose 50 health if I'm caught on the wrong side of an imp.
Yeah. To be fair, it's like, I almost see it as like one of the perfect games for PodPals, because I would never ever have seen that through to the end if there wasn't the goal of obviously getting to the end of it to chat about it with you guys. Like, so I suppose it's off the backlog now.
Yeah, PodPals has done its job.
Yeah.
If Doom 3 didn't, PodPals has. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a like if you've enjoyed our content. You can also check out our other great content on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the N-E Café podcast from all good podcast providers. Just follow the links in the description below.